Hey guys, welcome to the Monarchy podcast. And today we're having a Zoom podcast or Zoom cast as we initially called it. If you guys recall, this is actually how everything came about. So it's good to, start doing these again. And obviously I'm accompanied by Yuly as usual. And today's guest is Dan Schreiber. And please excuse me if I pronounce that incorrectly.
No, that's right. You got it right. You got it right.
Well,
yeah.
And just so that the viewers know, I came across your profile on LinkedIn, and I know that you're a certified meteorology consultant. But besides, I already knew that made you a badass. But we, did a little bit of research on you, and you're the former lead aviation meteorologist for the United States Air Force, and you're also the former battlefield operations meteorologist for the United States Army. And if that wasn't enough, you're the former senior duty meteorologist for the United States Air Force. So, wow, Daniel, welcome. And
well, thank you. Thank you. I think that, that's interesting because, I think LinkedIn kind of brings a little bit more out of that. Obviously, there's more than just me that was in the Air Force, right?
Yeah.
But certainly, I held some positions in the Air Force that, made me the senior ranking meteorologist at a particular base or at a particular assignment. And, those are good experiences to have behind me. And that's what I bring to the table when it comes down to the meteorology consulting field.
Yeah. And thank you for your service, Dan, by the way.
Oh, thank you, Yuly.
Thank you. And so now we know that you also, you're involved with property claims and, providing expert reports as to the weather and events that occur, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that so that we can get into it?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. So my line of work is what we call forensic meteorology, very much like a forensic engineer, just I deal exclusively with weather patterns and so forth that impact a variety of incidents, whether it be storm damage to a structure, insurance claim related, or it be accident reconstruction. One of my specialties, having come from the Air Force, is working in aviation crashes and so forth, kind of like the NTSB does. So I have a wide variety of expertise and knowledge in how weather works. And a lot of that is applied, especially to the claims consulting profession. Obviously, that's probably my number one customer base, is just because of so many weather damage claims come in. It's astonishing. So I spend most of my time working in that, but obviously not limited to the insurance claims industry.
Gotcha. And do you specifically represent, or do you do work for both parties, the plaintiff and the defendant side, or?
Yeah, yes, I do. I would say that just by happenstance, the majority of my work is done for plaintiffs, and I guess plaintiffs just tend to call me more often, or my word gets passed around amongst plaintiff attorneys and public adjusters and so forth. I certainly do work for insurance companies as well. At the end of the day, I pride myself on being honest when it comes down to exactly what the weather was on any given day. So I'm willing to work with anybody so long as that they're willing to take what I have to say and use it appropriately. At the end of the day, we're usually talking about the same storm or the same weather event. And therefore, those facts are the same regardless of who hires me. So yes, I do. I've worked high dollar litigation for defense as well. So, at the end of the day, so long as you're honest, that's all that really matters, in my opinion. So.
I agree. Is there, do you have knowledge of anybody else that does this in our industry, in the adjusting industry?
Yes, there are a number of certified consulting meteorologists and other non-certified meteorologists that work in the insurance claim industry. There's for folks that are interested, there's actually a group of us, and it's called the Association of Certified Meteorologists. Okay. ACM for short. And so, for instance, I don't do a whole lot of insurance claims up in the Northeast, like New York and New Jersey and all of. I've never lived up there. Doesn't mean I couldn't perform my duties up there, but there are like a million meteorologists who already live up there and take care of that sector.
Gotcha.
I'm not saying I'm not open to doing it. If somebody's listening and wants to hire me, by all means, I'd be happy to. But generally, a lot of my business comes from the South,
Gotcha.
Florida, from Texas. You know, there's far fewer of us down south than there are up in that Northeast portion of the U.S. So yeah, there are some. You know, and one of the big things that I always recommend to folks that are looking to hire a meteorologist on an insurance claim is there's really two types. There's the certified meteorologists, and then there's some that are non-certified, but they're like PhDs in meteorology, and they're for the most part well-established meteorologists. They know what they're talking about. I'd feel perfectly comfortable hiring them on my claim. And then there are the folks that really kind of are more amateur in the meteorology field, and they know how to program computers really well. And so you get a lot of those cheap weather reports, kind of print and rip whatever weather reports, cost not even $100 sometimes, and those ones I always caution folks, and I know they're widely used in the insurance industry, and some are better than others, but I always caution folks. You don't know the methodology that's used to produce that weather information. You can't call that person into court. They can't testify. It's really just an opinion of something that a lot of times they don't even have pictures. It's just this state there was this, and this state there was this, and with really nothing else behind it. And that's kind of like Googling. It's almost like Googling something and taking Google to court and saying, "Hey, well, Google said that this is what happened."
Gotcha.
Come on, and that's what I caution folks against. It works sometimes. Sometimes those types of weather reports and those folks who produce those weather reports, sometimes they work. Not always, though.
Yeah.
The reason. Oh, sorry. I was gonna mention that we read your article that you recently published about that, and we'll circle back to that in some samples.
So the reason why I asked is because I've been in the insurance adjusting industry for 14 years, and I've never come across somebody like you or a report like yours. So it's interesting. I was trying to figure out if this is something new or if it's just that I've never needed it or came across it.
Well, yeah, I think it's a budding industry. This industry in forensic meteorology is kind of coming out more now than it used to be in the past. It used to be very much, especially actually hiring an expert, used to be very much kind of only for high stakes litigation. For the large condominium associations, and we're talking millions and millions of dollars. A lot of times meteorologists aren't brought in until it's already a lawsuit. It's been a lawsuit for a while, and now they're coming down to the final moments. And it's still kind of like that. And that's why I think I've been kind of successful in what I did, is I brought my rates down a little bit, not excessively, but a little bit from competition. And sorry, I'm turning off my phone. And I brought my rates down, and I started advertising not only for attorneys, but also to work with adjusters, and bringing my rates down to kind of meet what a normal contractor would charge to take a look at a storm damaged residence. So I started inserting myself there a lot more. And there's not too many of us that actually do that are considered experts in the field. But to me, hey, look. I have storm damage on my house right now, hail damage. I'm working with the insurance company, and it's kind of a pain in the butt. And I'm going to help whoever I can.
We're licensed in Texas, by the way.
Oh, are you? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and we have our team out there now. What part of Texas are you in?
That's right. I live in Del Rio, Texas. We set some of the records this last winter storm for cold temperatures, and we had 11 inches of snow here, which was an all-time record. We're like not south Texas, but like south central Texas. We're kind of about an even line with San Antonio, so we're not very far north where you would normally get a lot of snow and a lot of cold. But
did you see that coming though? Did you see that
sure.
coming?
Sure, yeah. Well, not the amount of snow that we got. I knew we were going to get some snow, but the amount of snow that we got was record breaking. I mean, I would have never forecasted that much snow. It's very rare on a given year to see any snow here. So to forecast almost a foot of snow would be. But anyway, we did see a few inches coming for sure, and obviously the cold. I mean, it was 9 degrees Fahrenheit at my house. That's ridiculous. I mean, for a city like this where I live in, which is more or less even with San Antonio or New Orleans or Daytona Beach or somewhere in that line, if I told you Daytona Beach was going to be 9 degrees tomorrow, yeah. But anyway, interesting storm. We lost power for 3 days, and all of our water was, the water pump stopped working and everything like that. So it was kind of miserable, but we're all back to open now. So,
okay. Well,
so that's good.
To hear.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
We've heard about some denied claims already in Texas. Do you think that with all those denials, that's something you'll be involved in litigation with some of those cases?
Absolutely, and both for plaintiff and defense. And the reason that I say that is because of the mess that the Texas energy infrastructure is, which kind of became very apparent during this winter weather emergency that we had. There was, obviously folks did what they could. A lot of folks did what they could to wrap their pipes, keep the heaters on, and all of that. But they still had pipes bursting. One, because it was record cold, but two, because electricity went out for days on end. And so, where does the blame fall? Is it an act of God because it was so cold? Where is it the electric company because they shut the electricity off for so long? Or was it the regulatory authority that told the electric company to turn the electricity off for days on end? So I expect that there's going to be a lot of slinging mud back and forth between the insurance and the homeowners. I expect there's probably going to be a ton of subrogation going on. Because if you turn off somebody's heat for 3 days and it's 9 degrees outside, the homeowner could have done everything that they could have, and the pipes are still going to freeze and burst. It's just it. So where does the blame fall? And I expect that there's going to be ongoing litigation, ongoing claims battles for a long, long time. Because of this winter storm. It was the costliest winter storm. That's what they're saying, at least the costliest storm in total, actually, for the state of Texas. Now, it beats all the hurricanes and everything.
Wow.
So.
Well, if you or anybody that needs help with their insurance company, which I suspect that you might know people that will.
Of course.
We're here. Yeah. We're already there to help. So to have them.
Wonderful. Will do.
Excellent. So, tell me about the process. How do you evaluate? Let's say I have a claim in my house and I want to know whether or not a particular storm affected my specific house. How do you come to those conclusions?
Well, I was thinking about how to answer this question because it's hard to just talk about it. I'd really have to show it to you, right? But
which would be super cool, by the way. But
right.
We'll do some other time.
Yeah, we'll do it. Yeah, I mean, and I would love to show you how I come to those conclusions. And it's honestly, it's different for hail as it is for wind, as it is for tornadoes, as it is for hurricanes, as it is for anything else. It's just different. And so there is really no one size fits all, which is what a lot of the industry standard reports, weather reports are. They're kind of a one size fits all, and it's just simply not true. And so I use a lot of weather radar, a lot of satellite imagery. I use high resolution weather model data, weather balloon data, weather reports from airports, from trained weather spotters. I mean, you name it. I mean, I pull from about, 20, 25 different sources. It obviously depends on what the weather event is, but I pull data from all of these sources. Yes.
Dan, does everybody have access to the same platforms that you have access to do the research, or is that specific to you as a meteorologist? Consultant?
No, actually, believe it or not, everything that I have is publicly accessible. There is a couple of programs that I use to help analyze that charge a fee to use them, but they are open to the public essentially. So no, it is all data that is available and out there. The issue with that is you have to know how to interpret a lot of it because some of it's in code and some of it, but if you know how to read it, yeah, it absolutely is. I don't pay a thing. Very rarely do I pay a cent for the data that I actually bring in to analyze for a claim. It is almost entirely all out there. You just got to know where to look, got to know how to understand it, got to know what you're looking for, and that kind of brings in. And here's the other thing. I use what I use to come to my conclusions, whether hail hit a house or wind, the house, would have been susceptible to wind damage or whatever, is I use peer-reviewed methodologies. So I look for obviously all the latest studies, and this is how we determine how fast microburst wind speeds would be given a particular structure of a thunderstorm, or this is what a reasonable estimation of hail size would be given the environment, given the structure of the storm and the time of year and the temperatures aloft and all of that. So I take all that stuff and then I basically push it through a peer-reviewed filter of, well, the storm is 50,000 feet tall and it had this much, rotation, and it had, this and that, and this and that, and this and that. Apply it all to the peer-reviewed methodologies, and that's what helps me draw my conclusion. So when I produce a conclusion, it's not just my opinion. It is ultimately my signature at the bottom of the report, but my opinion is based upon, renowned peer-reviewed methodologies. That's why when if it eventually ends up in court, it's very hard to dispute because, right. Hey, look, I use the same methodology as the most famous meteorologists in the world who've been studying this for 50 years, and so that's where I think I kind of, where my clients get their bang for their buck is, hey, look, it's not just me looking at a storm and saying, 2 lines on, I think this storm was a severe hailstorm and you should pay. No. This is a real storm. Here's what the National Weather Service had to say about it. Here's what the other experts in the field, if you use their methodologies, this is what they would have to say about it. And ultimately, this is my conclusion based on all of this information.
And you're able to determine specifically in a zip code or a block, be able to say, these were the wind speeds that occurred on this property specifically.
It is difficult. There is obviously a margin of uncertainty, and that has to do with the resolution of the various weather products that we use. For instance, weather radar has it depends what distance the property is from the weather radar, but there's about a 250 meter resolution using super resolution data. There's if you're using level 3 radar data, then it extends out to 1 kilometer of resolution. Satellite imagery is obviously, there's less resolution there. Weather model data, even at the highest resolution, I think it's still about 3 kilometers. So there is a certain, there is this level of uncertainty when you're talking, your house, your neighbor's house, that's where I begin to say, hey, you know what? Here is my meteorological certainty about this event over the property location.
Okay, so you do it specifically on one property.
Well, sometimes it's one property. Most of the time it's one property. Sometimes I get hired onto like condominium associations and homeowners associations that involve several properties within a neighborhood. But yes, at the end of the day, it all comes down to reasonable meteorological certainty. That's all I can testify to. Obviously, I wasn't standing at that particular property when the hailstorm or windstorm happened. So I can't say 100% sure, right? Yeah. But based on the evidence provided, I am highly confident, or not so highly confident, that this particular weather event happened, and that's how I produce my reports. We'll put it this way. Can I draw you an analogy? I'm going to kind of walk you through an analogy. Do y'all follow baseball at all? Y'all know the. You know what a baseball stadium?
Yes, I understand, okay. But I don't follow it.
Let's put it in very simple terms, right? You have a baseball stadium, and you're standing there. You and me are standing there on home plate. Yuly, you were standing there on home plate, and you turn to me and you say, can you point me to the direction where John is in the audience? And I stand there and said, oh yeah, well, today John's out in left field. Yesterday there was a John in center field, and the day before that there was a John on the first baseline. That is kind of like the equivalent of one of those cheap weather reports. There was a John in the audience, and he was somewhere over here, right? There was hail on this day somewhere over here, right? Yeah. Somewhere in this, right? Okay. And I'm going to kind of take a swipe at both sides of the industry. It's kind of a joke, but I'm going to take a swipe at both sides of the industry here, right? So I say, yeah, John's in left field, which there's probably thousands of people in left field, at least hundreds. right? And so all the roofers, right? All the roofers say, "Oh, great, left field. They're all John. We're going to go and file claims on all those places." Right? Look at all those Johns out there, right? Right? Public adjusters are like, "Oh yeah. Okay." And they file insurance claims, based on John's in left field, so therefore everybody in left field is John. Insurance comes and says, no. We drew our little test squares and forget that it was all around women in the audience, so therefore nobody was named John. But we couldn't find John anywhere. Okay, there's no John out here. Denied, right?
Correct.
Well, the problem is the information about pointing to where John was not really definite enough. The plaintiff side, if you will, says because he's in left field, John's in left field, and therefore everybody in left field is John. The insurance says, no, we're not specific enough, and therefore nobody in left field is John. Then you call the expert. I'm the expert in finding John. I say, well, what are you looking for? What are you looking for? Are you looking for Big John? Are you looking for Little John? Oh, we're not looking for Little John. He's that rapper guy that's all tatted up. No. He don't come to baseball games, right? We're looking for Big John. I said, Big John. I said, Big John, man. I know something about baseball. And a guy named Big John, he's going to be over there in the foot-long nacho cheese chili dog section. That's where you're going to find Big John. And sure enough, Big John's over there, right? And that's the difference between what the industry standard for meteorology data is versus compared to, what an expert like myself and my colleagues can bring to the table is we're experts in Big John at the baseball stadium. Big John's going to be getting a hot dog, and that's where you need to look. And that will work both for the insurance company and it will work for the homeowner. At the end of the day, Big John is in one place, and we need to, does that make sense?
You just define where he's at.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, there's going to be some levels of uncertainty. Sometimes, not all my claims are cut and dry. They just aren't. If they were cut and dry, they probably wouldn't be a dispute. But I get brought in to say, hey, reasonably, meteorologically, scientifically, this makes sense, or this does not make sense. I just won. I didn't win it; the lawyer did, but we just settled a $2 million claim here in Texas. I was brought in by a rebuttal by a plaintiff's attorney, and he literally slapped down my rebuttal report, and it was almost instantaneously settled, $2 million, simply because I refuted one of those reports that didn't really have a whole lot of information on it. It was one of those cheapo weather reports, and that's what they were bringing to the table for a $2 million claim. Blew my mind. Yeah. It was easy to rebut, make $2 million off. I didn't, but the insured, settled for $2 million. Fantastic, great,
So, and sorry, you were going to say something.
No, I was just remembering last year at the wind conference, I remember one of those little workshops, they had a case where there was a roof that had hail damage and the insurance company denied it, saying it was not consistent with hail damage. The insured happened to have a video because it was so rare. It was like in northern Florida, and he happened to take a video the day that it happened of the hail falling on his house. And they denied it, saying it wasn't consistent. But what we often see is engineer reports, which is I find interesting. I've never actually seen a meteorology report in a claim, but they bring a lot of engineers in. Do you ever rebuttal with an engineer report?
Well, I don't speak as to my expertise in engineering because I don't have expertise in engineering.
No, but let's say an engineer were to say it wasn't consistent. Let's say, that damage is not consistent with hail damage, but you're able to prove that there was a hailstorm at the property at that time.
Sure. I mean, all the time. I think there's one particular agency that I tend to often rebut as far as there are engineers where they have some meteorologists on their team as well, and I end up getting called in to rebut their findings, at least meteorologically, quite often. And a lot of times it does work to success, and I love engineers. I think engineers are great. Don't get me wrong. I got no issues with engineers. But unless you practice in the field of meteorology on a consistent basis, stick to your lane. And they don't. And that's why I don't dive in. As far into engineering that I will ever get is when it comes down to tornado ratings. because the only way to rate a tornado strength is by looking at the damage. And there's a lot of meteorological documentation that talks about this sort of damage relates to this sort of winds when it comes down to, microburst and tornadoes. But even then, I always defer, to an engineer, to make sure that my findings are consistent with the engineering standard, not just a meteorological standard. So, again, I do often rebut a lot of engineers' reports when it comes down to the meteorology portion, and I work with a lot of engineers on the plaintiff side that take my reports and do what they do with them. So it works both ways.
Yeah, I think the engineers any engineer for that matter, they typically tend to use the weather reports from local weather radars, like the airport or wherever they have them. They wouldn't first go to a meteorologist, ask him for a report, and then base their report based on that. So that's a really good point that you bring up. So in essence, you guys, it's not about rebutting, or it's one does one thing and the other one does another. So.
Right, exactly. And what I've noticed with a lot of engineers, I can't speak for them all, but what I've noticed, I think, is a trend among at least the engineers that are hired by insurance companies, is they do look for National Weather Service data, which is good. I applaud that. That National Weather Service data is, it's kind of like the standard. It's good. That's it ultimately comes from professionals. The problem is a lot of times what they'll go and they'll find weather reports from a particular county, Miami-Dade, we'll say, and but say the property in question or in dispute is right up against Broward County, right? I mean, across the street's Broward County, virtually, right? A lot of times what I notice is the engineers don't even consider that proximity to Broward County, and they'll just simply look at reports from Miami-Dade, where in reality that property might actually be sitting closer to a relevant storm report in Broward County, but it was never considered by the engineer because all he did is put Miami-Dade. Yeah. And that's what I tend to see a lot. And then on top of that, just because something isn't reported doesn't mean it didn't happen. And that's what I see a lot as well. Oh, well, nobody reported hail happened. Well, not everybody goes outside, while it's the hailstorm's going, and immediately dial the National Weather Service and say, hey, it's hailing. I do that. I'm a meteorologist, but most people don't do that.
I didn't even know you could do that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly the point is storm reports are kind of a dime a dozen sometimes. You got to know how to kind of, okay, this one's realistic. This one was probably taken an hour after the fact. This one isn't even positioned in the right place. They must have given the incorrect location of the report. That happens all the time. No. And so, it's good to kind of take all those things into consideration, then look at the weather radar, look at the satellite, look at all the other environmental data and say, okay, this is where the property is. And when the radar is pink and purple over the property, it's probably there was some hail there. We got to dig a little deeper to see how big or how intense or how long it lasted or whatever. But hey, at least there's a suggestion that the storm was more intense over the property here than it was a mile down the road. Yeah. So forth. So yeah.
Daniel, is it possible for there to be a storm that is not captured by the local radars?
Sure, it happens. We'll put it this way. Yes, it happens. Sometimes there's a radar outage.
Which I've heard happens when there's like big storms. A lot of the radars go out, or they're.
Well, it does. Yeah. Well, sometimes a lot of them are on generators and so forth. So they do have a pretty amazing uptime rate. But Lake Charles is a perfect one. Lake Charles, Louisiana, is a perfect one because it got taken out by the hurricane Laura, I believe. Now, generally, a hailstorm or a windstorm is usually, unless it's a really, really bad one, is generally not going to take out a radar. Sometimes the radars are down for maintenance reasons or other reasons, so it is possible. But usually the coverage of the radar screen, there's other radars in the area that can kind of be utilized. What I tend to see most when we're dealing with, okay, this radar image just does not make sense, is when the property is actually too close to the radar. Melbourne, Florida is one of those places, but they're all over. Anywhere that's too close to the radar is going to be an issue. And that is when a storm is too close to the radar has a very kind of a thin beam. How do I do this on the video? Here we go. It's got a really thin beam, so it can only capture a very small portion of the storm if the storm is very close to the radar, where the beam kind of gets wider as you get further out and further at a distance. Now there's a point when it gets too far away from the radar, and now all of a sudden your resolution on the radar is, it's not as it's not as prime as you would like it. But yeah, it certainly does happen. I do deal quite a bit with storms that are too close to the radar. And the funny thing is because what that does is that screws up the algorithms that the weather technology uses to talk about wind speeds and hail size estimations and so forth. When the storm can actually accurately be captured by the radar, the algorithms don't know what to do. And then I start getting called from all the claims professionals and the lawyers saying, "Oh, our weather report from the weatherreport.com, that cost us $15 isn't working." Well, yeah, because the radar didn't see it right. And those are a little bit more challenging for me because there is a way to analyze them. There's a way to do anything in my profession. There is a way to analyze it, but it just takes some knowledge and know-how and how to attack that one a little bit differently than one that is clearly seen by the radar. It looks just like the textbook supercell tornado, and unfortunately in our world, it's just most everything is not textbook. Each storm is different. It falls differently. Hail falls differently over one property and another. Right. Florida hailstorms and windstorms are different than Texas hailstorms or windstorms. You just have to have that knowledge on, okay, here's what I'm dealing with. This particular season, this particular part of the country, this particular National Weather Service office, they're going to warn differently for different storms. And so it just takes a lot of expertise. And like I said, it's just not a one size fits all type of, line of work.
Yeah. Dan, I'm wondering if we can get a freebie from you.
Sure. Yeah.
But not a report, just a number.
Yeah.
In South Florida, are you able to say what was the max wind speed, the gusts that we sustained as a result of Ada? Oh,
Ada. Off the top of my head, I rightly don't know, and I'll tell you why. And this is one of those where I said I was going to give you a freebie, but I really can't give you a freebie with absolute confidence, right?
So we'll take a rain check then.
Because I don't. What's that?
We'll take a rain check on the freebie.
Yeah, right. Well, here's the thing. Hurricanes and tropical storms. It's widely understood in the meteorological world, but it's not widely understood in any other world. And I honestly didn't even understand it until I started working meteorology forensics. There's a lot of evidence that says just because a hurricane or a tropical storm, we'll say it's a hurricane, say it's a category 2. I dealt with this all the time with Irma. Let's say it's a category 2 or category 3. And the sustained wind speeds are 120 miles per hour. Well, that's your sustained wind speeds. Your wind gusts are going to be well in excess of that. And it's also well established that while you may have a tropical storm, which isn't even qualifying in sustained wind speeds to be a hurricane yet, so it's maybe 70 mile an hour winds. I've seen 100 mile an hour wind gusts from a tropical storm. And those higher wind gusts come a lot of times in the right front quadrant of the hurricane. Not always, but a lot of times they are.
Right front.
And right front quadrant. Yep. Anyway, a lot of times they accompany heavy rain showers. And so you'll see these rain bands, and you'll see some heavier rain bands, and those are generally going to be where your strongest winds are found. And so, I've seen tropical storms with 100 mile an hour wind gusts. It just happens. And that's why I can't rightly tell you, because it's really property specific sometimes. In fact, Ted Fujita, who's the guy who the Fujita scale of tornadoes was named after, he did a conference in Tampa, Florida, years ago. And it was, and he basically in his study said sometimes there are little wind swirls, little tornadoes, little pockets of high speed winds, very high speed winds, that can destroy a house, destroy a residence, and leave the residence next door completely intact. I mean, we're talking 1 or 2 building lots. That's it. And that's the difference in the wind speeds. And so when I attack hurricane losses, I have to look very, very carefully at that as high resolution as possible, because just because it was only 50 miles an hour down the street doesn't mean that it wasn't 100 miles an hour right there. And I got to be able to draw some conclusions and based on meteorological certainty of, hey, look, this happened in Daytona Beach, right? Daytona Beach Airport was 78 mile an hour, I think, or 76 miles an hour, something like that was their peak wind speed during Irma. Okay, well, I've got a building right next to Daytona Beach Airport. The same rain shower that caused 76 mile an hour or 78, whatever it was, at Daytona Beach went over the subject property that's right next to the airport. Is that reasonable meteorological conclusion that property, sustained somewhere in that range, 75 mile an hour or so winds? Yeah, I think it is, because the evidence points to that, right? But maybe if it's 10 miles away, that's a whole different story. The same rain shower probably did not go over that property. And so that's why hurricanes can be difficult for me.
Well, you probably haven't come across them yet, because, I mean, Ida was November, at least in South Florida, it hit November 8th, right?
The 8th or 9th, yeah.
So those claims are now getting either covered or denied. So I suspect that you'll have a few of those coming, and I'm even considering. We haven't spoken prices, and I don't know if that's something you want to get into, how much you charge. Because I'd be interested, not only for me, but for all the other public adjusters out there, to use you, as an expert in their reports to prevent denials or to overturn denials, which is something that we do here a lot at Monarch. So I suspect that you'll be getting a lot of work ADA related. And secondly, are you able to say how much, or typically what's the range of your fee?
Yeah, of course. In fact, most meteorologists don't offer their fee schedule on their website. I do. I think being transparent about the whole thing is people like to see how much it's going to cost them before they before they ask me for a report, right? And so if we're talking pre-litigation consulting, pre-litigation report writing for public adjusters, it's $85 an hour. And I work by the hour because some claims are just very simple for me to handle. They're so cut and dry, I could do it in my sleep. But sometimes they're not. Hurricanes sometimes, they span 24, 48 hours sometimes, and sometimes they just take a little bit, more analysis. Now sometimes we're combining hail and wind claims. Okay, well now I've got to go run my hail checklist and my wind checklist, and so it varies in hourly. The hourly rate is the same, but it varies in the cost of a report. But it's $85 an hour. I would say, generally speaking, I bill usually between $300 and $500 when it comes down to a written report. Okay. But it's been all the way up past 1,000 before, and it's been less than 200 before. So, I mean, it really just comes down to how much time it takes me. Once it's in litigation, that ranges based on how high stakes it is and so forth. But generally, we're talking between $150 and $250 an hour. But at that point, I'm billing the lawyer. Adjusters don't have to worry about that as much. So
yeah, and especially also if you have to testify. I mean, that's a lot of time and effort you have to put into that. So I think it's very reasonable. But I'll definitely we have some claims that have recently been denied, and I think I want to just see what you have to say, and if I could use your report, assuming that it's
favorable for us.
Favorable. Otherwise, we may not even have a claim. But
that's what I'd like to offer too. Yeah, and that's what I'd like to offer too. Let me look at your claim. Let me look at your claim. Let me look at the property. Let me tell you if I think you got something before I put anything into writing. And that way, you know what you're getting yourself into. I'm not going to charge you for $400 weather report if it's not going to have anything useful in it. I'm not going to even bother writing it if you don't think it's going to be useful. So help yourself, help me, help you. If you got something you want me to take a look at, yeah, sure, I'd be happy to take a look at it for you. And if it's something really simple, I may not even charge you. If it's something that's going to take me a little bit of time, yeah, I might send you a bill, but it's not going to be high. It's not going to be as much as a report would be, and that's because I want to help you solve your problem at the lowest cost possible. And if that means I don't write a report, great. If I do write a report, even better,
Yeah.
And I'm going to take that report as written and as submitted to you. And if it ends up in court, it's going to be the same report. And if I have to go to deposition and trial, it's going to be based on that same information. So you are getting information from me as soon as you talk to me, essentially. You give me a call, usually I'll get back to you the same day. You're going to get the information that's highly certain that, is going to carry this one all the way through to completion, whatever that may be. And that's what I pride myself on. So.
You don't have to go to the property at all, right? You could do everything, off-site.
Generally, yeah. I've never had to visit a property. It usually helps to have an engineer that has examined the property or some pictures or so forth that can help me determine, wind directions or, probable hail size or something like that. But no, I've never had to actually visit a property. All that weather information is available on the internet. Just got to know where to go and how to read it. So it is. It's the cost for me to operate is quite low.
I have a question. Sorry. How accurate do you think W Underground is? Like that website? Is that a reputable website that you recommend?
Weather Underground? Yeah, sure. They're, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe they're owned by the Weather Channel, which is owned by IBM. Well, there's several different subsidiary companies in there somehow or another. But yeah, I believe they're basically the same thing as the Weather Channel, more or less. To be honest with you, some of that weather information in there is good. I've used it before for if I can find, maybe there's no weather sensors nearby. It's maybe a more rural area, but some farmer has a little weather sensor in his backyard, and that's the only one in 10 or 20 miles, and so I will use Weather Underground sometimes. I try not to unless I really need to, and the reason I say that is because this is on the forensic side of things. I don't really pay attention to their forecasts. I make my own forecasts, but on the forensic side of things, I try to stay away from it if I can. Every once in a while, there's a good nugget. But the reason I try to stay away from it is because a lot of folks have these backyard weather sensors that they put onto they call it the Wonder Map. And I mean, there's thousands of these on their website. But a lot of people don't know how to properly site their weather sensors, how to properly place them. They'll put them in a little between their shed and their house, so there's a wind tunnel or something like that, or they'll put them underneath the tree or blocked by a building or something, and so a lot of the wind speed ratings are just not going to be representative of what the actual true wind speed probably was. Same with the rainfall accumulation. And some of the weather sensors, they only cost $50. You're not going to get a good weather report from a $50 weather instrument. You're going to get it from a $100,000 weather instrument that you're going to have at an airport. And so that is cited correctly. So not to say that it's all bad, and there certainly is information there that is usable, but I generally try to stay away from it as much as I can because I just find it to be somewhat unreliable for the purposes that I'm using it for. But not to totally bash it either. There is some good information there.
Gotcha. So hurricane season was moved up to May 15. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I don't watch the news, so I have no idea why they did that or what's going on.
Well, gosh, you watch the news, man. You beat me to it. I did not know that. But hey, it doesn't really matter to me. Hurricanes happen any time of the year, really. I mean, yeah, they're most susceptible, I guess, in the later summer and so forth when the ocean water is warm. I didn't know it had gotten buttoned up. I remember there being talks about it. It was like
yesterday. They announced it like yesterday.
Did it come out?
Yeah.
Gosh, you guys are more on top of it than I am. Yeah, look, hurricanes are going to. I mean, shoot, a couple of years ago we saw a hurricane. I don't think it hit anything. I think it was just out there in the ocean, but it was in like January or something. So, hurricanes happen when the ocean water is warm, and that's why they happen in the tropics a lot. And that's why they begin to dissipate or turn into what we call extratropical cyclones as they move further north. So hurricanes are like. They are a very powerful machine. That's how it was explained to me in college, and I agree with that to this date. Hurricanes form from nothing but air and water. Warm water and the air above it. That's how hurricanes form. And they are machines, and they just feed off of that. If we could create an engine that runs their vehicles, based on just air and water, gosh, man. So anyway, that's how hurricanes form. But they do need warm water and air moving on top of it.
Gotcha.
The warmest water obviously is going to happen, in the summertime, especially the later summer. So why they moved it up to May, I don't know. It's irrelevant to me. Hurricane season is whenever the ocean is warm enough to produce a hurricane. That's my opinion.
So that's no indication that it's going to be a busier season or anything like that than moving it up to.
No, I don't believe so. Look, here's the thing. What's interesting though, and this is happening this year too. It hasn't officially happened, but it's going to happen, and that is we're going to see new climate normal values being released every 10 years on the decade. Every 10 years, the new average high temperature and the new average low temperature and the new average rainfall is released, and it's in 10-year increments. So widely, not everywhere, but widely around the planet, it has gotten warmer, and so we're going to see new normals, and that could be part of why maybe the hurricane season got bumped earlier, because just with new normals being a little bit higher than the previous ones, that would mean the ocean water is a little bit higher than previous decades, and therefore it kind of makes sense to move hurricane season up a little bit. That's speculation, but it would kind of make sense that that's why they did it when they did it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Dan, now that you mentioned warming, I'm curious because I'm very science oriented, and I agree with all the scientists that global warming is a result of our own doing in a sense, but I'm not an expert, so I'd love your opinion on that.
Wait, let me just add something to that. Did you hear about that glacier that just broke off? That's like the size of 9 states of Florida.
I don't watch the news, so no, I did not hear about that.
Oh, gosh.
Science.
Interesting.
It's about science.
I'm learning all sorts of news from y'all.
Never
I didn't hear about that either. Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. And it is such a complicated subject. And the whole global warming, climate change, and all of that. And to be completely honest with you, I'm not educated enough in climate. I'm a meteorologist, not a climatologist. And so I don't feel as though it's exactly my lane to speak as an expert in climate change. But what I can tell you is that, yes, there is some warming that is occurring. But there are other sides to this story, and that is the way that meteorologists and hydrologists and people involved in the climate studies, the way that we have measured warming temperatures over the years has changed. Our methodologies have changed to measure the warming of the ocean and the warming of the landmass and so forth. So when our methodologies have changed on how we measure temperature, obviously our results are going to change. And as we get more weather stations put up across the globe and so forth, and now we're going to start to have more data points that we didn't used to have. And so I always caution with climate change. I'm neither a skeptic nor a denier of the whole issue, but I always caution is, look, the methods that we've used even in 10 years ago and 20 years ago and 30 years ago and 40 years ago are different than the methods that we're using now. So it's very difficult to draw a real good conclusion based on every year we seem to be using a different method to analyze the data. So that's my 2 cents on the thing. I think there's more to the picture than what's being advertised. We just have to be careful. What I can tell you, though, is that there is a lot of evidence that supports the increase in temperatures in urban areas of large cities, and that's widely established that those are called urban heat islands. You can even see them on satellite overnight. On a clear night, you can see the satellite, and you'll see this dark spot over, metroplexes and so forth. Those are called urban heat islands, and obviously, if you build more concrete, build more roads, build more infrastructure, you're going to have less cooling at night. Not necessarily more warming during the day, but less cooling at night. You have less cooling, your overall average temperature is going to increase, not because of more warming, but because of less cooling. And so that is one thing that's established. And chances are we have more weather stations in these urban heat islands than we do in rural areas. And so, of course, I think our data is a little bit skewed sometimes, and I don't see it as much of an emergency as some of my colleagues do. I just think we need to take a better look at the data and how we analyze things instead of just immediately resulting to, Americans and people in general are killing the climate. I think there's more to the picture. That's
so
all.
we're not going to sink. We're not going to sink just yet.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Florida still has a few years left.
Let's talk about
and here's the thing: you deal with hurricanes all the time, right? We saw a record-setting hurricane season, and I think that has a lot of Floridians concerned. We had a record-setting hurricane season in 2005, and 2006 was like hardly anything. So, how can you go from one record to basically nothing the next year? And that's just how weather works sometimes.
Yeah.
We have technology these days that can tell us that there's a hurricane out in the middle of the Atlantic that is never going to hit any land at all, but we still name that hurricane, and we still look at that hurricane, and that hurricane becomes part of our database of hurricanes. 50, 60, 70, I don't know, long time ago, 100 years ago, we didn't have that. We didn't have satellites. We didn't have that information. So a hurricane could have happened out there. We'd have never even known about it. So that's why I say, just always double check the data points. That's all I'm saying.
Excellent. Dan, sorry. I've called you Daniel, Dan, and now I just called you Danny. Great.
No, it's all right. It's all right.
Dan, so Yuly, we want to go over this report if you don't mind.
Sure.
Regarding it's an algorithm or analysis of meteorology and insurance claims.
Okay. It was an article you recently published that we thought was really interesting, specifically regarding our industry and these weather reports, which we touched base a little bit on them. And as you state here in the article, you mentioned a lot of these reports are incomplete, incorrect, or inaccurate, and it costs millions of dollars for homeowners and property owners and insurance attorneys. And
Sure.
You list some examples here too. Can you tell us a little bit about how these reports, how you think they're skewed and how they're affecting, like the homeowners and the insurance claim industry?
Sure. I mean, my analogy earlier was about Big John at the baseball game, eating the foot-long chili cheese nacho hot dogs. Of course, there's one particular bullet point I had put in that article that talked about, how I was hired on by an attorney who was here in Texas, plaintiff's attorney, he said, "Man, this weather report isn't working for me. This I think it was like a $15 weather report. I mean, anyway." And I took a look at it, and I'm like, "God." It took me a minute to just look through this cheapo weather report, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, this doesn't even seem to make sense. I'm like pulling up the data myself and comparing it to this weather report because ultimately I'd like to be able to prove and disprove. I'm a scientist. That's what I do. I prove or disprove of the evidence that's before me. So I'm trying to duplicate this weather report, saying, where did they get this information from? And it turns out they used the wrong weather radar, which was far too distant to properly analyze the hailstorm in question. Then they analyzed the wrong storm altogether. There were two storms that day. One produced hail, the other did not. And then they pulled the storm reports, the storm spotter reports, from the other storm that did cause hail, but applied it to the storm that did not cause hail using the wrong radar. So you can imagine I was very confused, and obviously the attorney was. This was a several $100,000 claim.
And it was a claim that was denied?
It was a claim. It was a lawsuit already. It was a claim that was denied for a commercial structure, and so it was several hundred thousand in dispute, and that was the weather report that was being used. And I don't know how that claim made it as far as it did, to be honest with you, until I got involved because holy smokes, I just didn't understand. I didn't understand it at all because it really wasn't that tough of a storm to analyze. It was in a populated area. It was well covered by the correct radar. All it took was putting even a proofreading of that other report would have probably helped the case, but it just didn't happen. And so there was hundreds of thousands of dollars online. And here's the other thing. I was hired by the plaintiff's attorney. The insurance folks could have hired their own meteorologist and easily rebutted that. Easily rebutted it, and it wouldn't even been part of the question. But they didn't do that either. And so it's kind of I don't want to say a failure on both sides. It ultimately getting resolved in the favor of the plaintiff.
So they
shortly
settled.
after I issued. They did, and it was in favor of the plaintiff. And I'd like to believe my weather report helped that.
I'm sure it did.
Yeah. But sure, it never needed to go that far. It never needed to go that far. If the right weather information was presented at the very beginning, preferably before the lawsuit was even, and before there was even a lawsuit, it probably would have been resolved. Maybe not. I'm not an interpreter of policy, and that was the other thing in question, right? But as far as the weather, from a weather standpoint, it never needed to go there. And that's where I like to inject myself. I love working with adjusters. Even though they pay me less than the attorneys do, I love working with adjusters because we try to get things settled before they make a lawsuit. And it's better for the homeowner, it's better for the insurance company. Both people are going to save money, both people are going to save time, both people are going to save stress.
Yeah. And it's a fair thing to do too. I mean, like in that way as well.
Right.
The homeowner should have been, or the property owner, in that case it was commercial, they should have been paid from the beginning. They would have saved, like you said, money in attorney fees and experts, and the homeowner or the property owner would have been compensated and fixed their property, probably months or even years sometimes sooner. So we share that same sentiment across a lot of denied claims where
No, and I have a feeling that we're going to be working together a lot moving forward, because we've noticed that our claims tend to drag out, not so much because of what we're doing, but because the ball's in the insurance company's court. But I think if from the beginning we can show, hey, look, our claim is based on not only the damages but this weather report that we have in hand, things will probably move a little bit quicker. So I'm looking forward to working with you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, we're experts in our field, but by no means are we engineers or meteorologists. And we've been successful at overturning denials, just stating like the facts and the things that we know. So imagine if we had an expert, meteorologist
Sure.
also on our side.
Sure. Go ahead.
Dan, real quick, how do people find you for other adjusters or attorneys that may come across this?
Well, they're going to find me through you, I guess.
Well, yeah, but how do your LinkedIn name or your Instagram? I don't know if you have a website.
Yeah, I have LinkedIn. I'm not as active on LinkedIn as I probably should be, but I am on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn under Daniel Schreiber. I go by Dan, but on LinkedIn I'm Daniel Schreiber. And then I have a website, and my company's name, which I'm the sole proprietor of that company, but my company's name is STWX Strategic. So STWXstrategic.com. Okay. And they can find me on my website as well. Or they can just type in, Dan the meteorologist from Texas into Google, and it'll probably come up. But, yeah.
But we'll make sure to link and, tag you on our post and our podcast.
Yeah.
Guys, and Dan, give me a second. Let me just tell the viewers, if you're enjoying this so far, if you find this information valuable, please subscribe and like and comment and let us know how we're doing. I really appreciate that. So, and also leave some comments for Dan so that he can read them and
or questions.
Exactly. He can get back to you on those.
Wonderful. Yeah.
You were going to say something, Dan, and I know we're coming up to the hour, so I don't want to keep you much longer.
No. All I was going to say is look, it's good to bring a meteorologist. And again, yes, I'm on here. I'd love to work with folks, but there are other meteorologists out there too that are well qualified. It's good to bring a well qualified meteorologist onto your insurance claim quickly before a whole lot of paperwork gets going. And the reason I say that, and it's good for both the insurance companies and for the insured, again, because you're going to solve that problem very quickly. I deal with a lot, and this is unfortunately, this is the problem is also on the plaintiff side. Sometimes is you get folks. A lot of times they're general contractors and roofers. They're looking for work. They find damage on a house, and there was a hailstorm in Orlando last year. Let's just say it happened to them. And sometimes that works, and sometimes that doesn't work. And I think it's good to be fair across the board in that a meteorologist, a certified meteorologist, is going to tell you whether or not that claim has merit. And the earlier you bring them on, the earlier you're going to get that answer. So nobody's spending hundreds and thousands of dollars trying to fight a claim that it really has no merit. And that's not fair to the insured. Yeah, exactly. It's not fair to the insured. It's not fair to the insurance. It's just not the honest way to do business. And so, again, I'd be happy to work with you guys. I'd be happy to look at your claims. If you folks that are listening, I'd be happy to work with you. I don't care if you're plaintiff in defense. I'm going to give you the honest weather answer. And that's in the best interest of everybody. So.
That's very much appreciated, Dan. And I thank you so much for taking our invite to be on this podcast. I've actually had sent your information before to my team, but I guess it got lost in transition. And I came across one of your posts again, and I'm like, this time I'm gonna get them. So I'm glad we were able to bring you on.
No, it was an absolute pleasure of mine. So I really thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's keep in touch. And to the viewers, once again, I know I just said this, but it's important that you listen to what I'm saying and subscribe and like and comment, because when you guys subscribe and like, that means a lot to us, and at least we know how we're doing with your comments. So thank you so much for watching, and I'm going to check out at this time. See you on the next one.
Right. Thank you so much, Dan.
Hey, thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Take care.